is Mel. This is Create and Company, where creatives come to get back into their flow. Today, we are on the very last section of our Forever International online book club of the book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Mr. Rick Rubin. And it's bittersweet to end. And yet this is the kind of book I keep saying we're probably going to reread, each of us in our own time. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, so by the way, if you want to know how to work with me as your creative coach, that info is in the Dropbox. Making up new words. The Dropbox below. Okay, so the first mini chapter is on page 385. I'm going to talk louder because I noticed my past videos were not so loud. And by the way, today's section is between pages 385 and the very last page, which falls on 405. And you know what's cool about this book? I love when books do this. I didn't even use it because I put my notes elsewhere, but look, he's got like 10 pages of lined paper for you to add your reflections, additions, observations. That's very generous. Okay, so check it out. The mini chapter called The Gatekeeper is about the editor that you become towards the end of a project when you're deciding what it's finally going to be. He differentiates this from the inner critic, which he says tends to hold us back and make the whole process, well, I'm paraphrasing, but the critic is that part of you that doesn't believe in the work and doesn't even help you advance on it. The editor is more of an ally in the process because the editor is going to take out what's unnecessary and possibly send you to find more that was missing that you only noticed at the very end. He says that no matter how many selves of yourself were involved in the construction of this work, the one who will determine the final expression of the work is this gatekeeper, this editor in you. And your role as the editor is to gather and sift. Who knows what the word sift means? Have you ever used a sift when you're sifting flour for a recipe or even sifting for gold? I grew up in California, so there was that in one river and another. To sift is to let that fall through, which is unnecessary, and keep that which is essential. That's my own words, but okay, he says culling the work down to the best version of itself. Sometimes the editor will find holes and send us out to gather data to fill them. Other times there exists a wealth of information, and the editor will remove what's unneeded to reveal the finished work. He says it's a demonstration of taste, this editing process, and you'll be drawn to different rhythms, colors, patterns. Though they might not live together harmoniously, the pieces must fit together in the container. So again, we have these seeming contradictions. By the way, another mini chapter in the ending of this book is called Harmony, so we will get there. Now this is key. He says the editor has to set the ego aside. That's been a theme throughout this book. You don't want the ego to make you hold on to something just because you put a lot of work into it. Has that ever happened to somebody that part of your design or part of your choreography, etc., took so much time that for you to take it out in the final version almost feels wrong because you would be taking away all that time you put in? But here he says, let go of ego, don't make it about you, and don't make it about this is where you differentiate the process of making the work and the work itself. He says, the editor's role is to remain unattached and see beyond these passions to find unity and balance. Talented artists who are unskilled editors can do subpar work and fail to live up to their gift's promise. Interesting, right? Because now we have skill, but do you have the detachment to let the work be more important than your ego? The editor steps back, views the work holistically, and supports its full potential. The editor is the professional in the poet. The editor is the professional in the poet. Okay, then on page 387, he summarizes what is the ruthless edit. He's made allusion to this earlier in the book when he talked about the chapter essence. I remember he was talking about stripping things down to as little as possible to make the work be innerly coherent per se. And so here he says that too. He says to take away as much as possible. He says we are deciding what absolutely has to be there in order for the work to still be itself, what is completely necessary. In addition to getting to the heart of the work, through this brutal edit, we change our relationship to it. We come to understand its underlying structure, almost like a skeleton under all the muscle and bone, muscle and skin, and realize what truly matters. To disconnect from the attachment of making it and see it for what it is. Here's some questions he proposes you can ask in this phase. What effect does each component have? Does it amplify the essence? Does it distract from the essence? Does it contribute to the balance? Does it contribute to the structure? Is it absolutely necessary? This reminds me of when I did Marie Kondo method of organizing many of my possessions. Comment below if you've ever done a ruthless edit to your belongings. That is what happened when I did that. Like I looked at an object, a piece of clothing, a decoration, a piece of paper, and I asked, does this bring me joy? And is it absolutely necessary? With all these layers removed, you may stand back and notice that the work is successful as it is in its simplest form. Yep. We're not looking for more for the sake of more. We're looking for more for the sake of better. So we've heard that before. It's quality, not quantity. It comes in here as well. Don't just make your work longer or more busy or more complex because you think that'll get it more respect or more impact. Be honest with yourself and realize, can I do more? Can I do better with less? The goal is to get to the point that when you see it, you know it couldn't have been arranged any other way. There's a sense of balance, of elegance. Yep. And I want to hear below, have you ever been in this editing phase with any of your creative works? And are you the kind of person that can let go of parts of your work easily when you edit, or do you cling? And is it very hard for you to cut some of the fat, as they say? Tell us about your editing process. And if it's been difficult for you, what are you learning here and what can you apply? And think of works you like in your life. Are they simplified? Or do they seem like they have a lot on them? Here's a quote he puts by Charles Mingus. Making the simple complicated is commonplace. Making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creativity. So that challenge of getting to the essence more directly, more simply, more honestly. Okay, the next mini chapter is called Why Make Art? And this is a beautiful way to end this book. It's the semi-last part. I love that he asked this question because I, as a creative and a coach for creatives, have still come to some confusion about this question. I'll admit that sometimes I think I'm creating art to help the world, to express myself, to explain something, to make sense of something, to make something right, and so on. And remember in this book earlier, he said things that remember how he told us to take off the pressure to make a point or change a political view or change the world or heal the world. He said that can happen as a byproduct, but that you don't have to make that your goal. And here he says that a paradox comes about when you participate deeply and you deepen that creative act in your life, when you're really going for it and you've read this book, for example, and you're putting your hands in the clay. He says a paradox happens. Ultimately, the act of self-expression isn't really about you. And he says that most of us who choose the artist path don't have a choice. He says it calls us like the turtles are called to go lay their eggs on have you ever seen videos of that? Lay their eggs on the beach. And he says we follow that instinct, and that when we deny it, we are dispirited, or we are de-energized, we are uninspired, we're less alive. And so he says this impulse is always there, guiding our aim beyond ourselves. In the moment we feel the work is taking shape, there's a dynamic surge, followed by an urge to share, in the hopes of replicating that mysterious emotional charge in others. Okay, so take that into account, because later he's going to call it an echo. So it's like you feel a charge, you share a charge, that charge is then passed on to others. And I feel like reading this word for word, this next part, because I'm not going to be able to summarize how beautifully he said this. This is the call to self-express our creative purpose. It's not necessarily to understand ourselves or be understood. We share our filter, our way of seeing, in order to spark an echo in others. Art is a reverberation of an impermanent life. As human beings, we come and go quickly, and we get to make works that stand as monuments to our time here, enduring affirmations of existence. Michelangelo's David, the first cave paintings, a child's finger paint landscapes. They all echo the same cry, like graffiti scrawled in a bathroom stall. Who's seen that? Who's been to those dive bars where it's a whole symphony of messages left behind? And then he says, after all those examples, he says in bold letters, I was here. I was here. When you contribute your point of view to the world, others can see it. It's refracted through their filter and distributed again. This process is continuous and ongoing. Taken all together, it creates what we experience as reality. Every work, no matter how trivial it may seem, plays a role in this greater cycle. The world continuously unfolds. Nature renews itself. Art evolves. Each of us has our own way of seeing the world, and this can lead to feelings of isolation. Art has an ability to connect us beyond the limitations of language. Through this, we get to face our inner world outward, remove the boundaries of separation, and participate in the great remembering of what we came into this life knowing. Are you ready? There is no separation. We are one. So thank you, Rick Rubin, for Why Make Art. That mini chapter was super poderoso. And I remember when I first got this book, I hadn't started it yet. I had a couple artist friends come over after a photo shoot we did. And I used it as almost like an oracle. Like I flipped through it and told them to stop, and I would read them a page as a guidance. And that's the page they got. So I started at the end in this book. I remember the first page I read out loud was the I was here declaration of why we make art. So we revisit it now today together. All right, the next mini chapter is called Harmony. He touches on concepts of harmony in mathematics, equations, balances of sounds in songs, and in nature. He says when we look to nature, we see harmony. And then he says that sometimes harmony is the goal in our works of art, but sometimes the non-harmony is part of it. Have you ever heard like a hard rock song or something that seems really, really intense and busy, and then suddenly there's peace that contrasts the harmony or the smoothness? Well, he makes allusion to that. He says a great work doesn't have to be in harmony. Sometimes the point of the art is to show imbalance or to create a sense of unease. And he says in a song, when you hear a dissonant harmony suddenly fall in tune, there's a pleasing effect. He talks about finding harmony in universal principles, and he says that beyond art, like, do you see harmony in the universe? And if you don't, he says that that's okay because that's part of the mystery too. So here I feel like he's covering all our bases in this very abstract, subtle concept of harmony. And if you are a seasoned artist in your craft, I wonder what you have to say about harmony. Comment below. Do you put or feel harmony in your music, in your paintings, in colors, in movements? I'm curious what role harmony plays for you. He says, for those who don't come to this knowing naturally, it can be developed given time. So don't worry if my question got you a little confused. It's something that you can develop. Through practiced attunement, you can grow alert to these natural resonances, more acutely sensing what's in balance and recognizing the divine proportions. When you're creating or completing a work, there's a clearer recognition, a harmonic ring. There's a sense of accord, a coherence. The individual elements merge and become one. So curious about what harmony will be in my works of art, my books, my dance, maybe in these YouTube videos, because they're a work of art. And so will there and how will there be harmony throughout them? So this was one of the more complex mini chapters. So if you're reading the book, I recommend you reread it and tell me what you think and tell the community what you think. He says the magic is not in the analyzing or the understanding. The magic lives in the wonder of what we do not know. So maybe that's why this chapter left me a little bit with a question mark, because at the end he gives that value as well. The mystery and the not knowing. Okay, he poetically leads us to the end of this book with what we tell ourselves. And what we tell ourselves, according to him, will never suffice. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what the work is, what effect it's having on the world, he says none of that will ever get to the truth, okay? And so in a way, he says that's not the point. And that when with each story we tell ourselves, he says, we negate possibility. Did you understand that? So the more stories we tell, the more we are limiting and walling off what is possible. This links to what he said at the beginning of the book about that openness to inputs and to not putting them in predetermined boxes and being still like a child that is open and curious. Here he says, all our efforts to make sense of ourselves and our art are a smokescreen, an obfuscation. Say that a few times, obfuscation. They don't illuminate what is, they mislead us. We have no way of knowing what is insignificant and what is essential, or what our contributions mean. So, okay, here's another contradiction I found, but I'll live with it. Earlier he said, find the essence and, edit it down to the essence. And here he's saying we have no way of knowing what is essential. So as best as we did that work, it's not up to us as an individual, apparently, to decide what's essential and to name it, explain it, and define it, yeah? So he says, we tell ourselves varying stories of who we are and how the works get made, but none of them matter. Okay, so he says if we tell these stories, then reality is diminished, rooms of the self are walled off, truth collapses to fit a fictional organizing principle we've adopted. As artists, we're called to let go of these stories again and again and blindly put our faith in the curious energy drawing us down the path. Faith. Faith. What does it mean to you? Comment below. And are you feeling the draw of that curious energy? Let that draw you. Don't define it. It's almost like don't put it in the GPS. Just walk towards where you think you're being called. Here we go. Almost done. The artwork is the point where all the elements come together. The universe, the prism of self, the magic and discipline of transmuting idea to flesh. And if these lead you into contradiction, into territories that seem unbridgeable or unknowable, that doesn't mean they aren't harmonious. Even in perceived chaos, there is order and pattern. A cosmic undercurrent running through all things, which no story is immense enough to contain. Dun, dun, dun. So, maybe what he's saying here is give it a go, but don't think you'll understand it as you go, and don't try to control it. Surrender to the current of the cosmic nature that is pulling you to be part of this giant mysterious dance. And don't try to understand it. Don't try to explain it, but do something that you're called to do. The universe never explains why. He finishes on that phrase. Let's see if you can see it. Yep. The universe never explains why. Cheeky little universe. Well, that brings us to the end of this first Forever International Online Book Club. And I know you want more, so I want to hear in the comments below which books are calling you, which ones have you heard about in the creative realm, or maybe you've read and you want me to reread them with you. I know I have a few in the works. I'm looking at some right now over there. There's one called The Music Lesson. There's one called On Doing Nothing, and stuff like that. I would love to know who you are, what creativity is calling you, what project is in the works or in your heart. Comment below so I can get to know you, because when you subscribe, I don't usually know who you are. And I'd love to know who's on the other side of this screen. Okay, this was so fun. Look at that. A work of art accidentally made. And yeah, this is going to go on my bookshelf and I'll reread it in due time. Thank you for joining me. Bye.